Hi there everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to talk about some of the tourism maps we have in our collection in the library here. My name is Melissa Lawton. I'm the archivist and librarian here at the Museum of Northern Arizona. Let's go ahead and get started. A couple of disclaimers. Some of the historic maps that we have do have some, outdated and not good depictions of certain people, a lot of Native Americans. So just so you know, we will be going ahead and showing those as part of the history of maps, and especially in this area, but just want to let you know that that is going to happen. So with that, as we start to think about tourism and what is now an industry in the United States, and especially the Southwest, we kind of have to realize that this was happening before everyone had a car. I know that's hard to think about in these days where everyone has Google Maps on their phone and can go anywhere with their GPS, but back in the early 1900s, there really were only printed material to really help travelers find where they were going, find accommodation, and attractions to go see. So, before the advent of everyone having a car and heading out on a family road trip, really as soon as the railroads hit the West, and especially the Four Corners area, the Colorado Plateau, where we're situated, as soon as there were railroads coming out here, we had people coming out from the East Coast to see what all the fuss was about, see all the people and all the amazing natural wonders that we have in this area. And so kind of one of the first pieces I wanted to show is this map right here from the Santa Fe Railroad. This is from about 1912, and I'm actually going to flip it over here so I can show you. You'll see that this has actually been ripped off of some of the rest of this pamphlet, but I wanted to show you that even at this time they were using a lot of photographs to kind of advertise the places to see, things to do, but I wanted to flip this over because I love this little, ask for Arizona, the newest state. So that's kind of how we can date this to around 1912, because that's when Arizona became a state. And so right then at statehood and before, as I mentioned, we have tourists coming out to the West and to Arizona on the railroads. And so this map here kind of shows the different places you can go on the Santa Fe main line and all the different forks that you can go on here. So people would come in through Flagstaff, through Williams, and then they would actually head down to Phoenix through Prescott here. This is kind of where 89A is today. 89 goes down this way. But of course, the biggest attraction in the northern part of Arizona, you can see there's the San Francisco Mountains, the Painted Desert, and you can see that they hint at the Hopi Indian Reservation up here, and of course the Grand Canyon. And so this is that line between Williams and the Grand Canyon, which is still operated today. But that was the main way to get to the Grand Canyon, would be on the railroad. You go right up to the south rim there where the Grand Canyon Village is there. And it's also really interesting to me personally that this is all in color. There's no black ink, there's no black print. They chose this purple and this orange to complement it, to try and make it as attractive as possible to people, to really get them to come out. So in Arizona, it's interesting because the research that I've done here in focusing on other states is that, for example, in Colorado, a lot of the material that was being produced around the same time was really boosterism for the state, getting people to come and live in the state, whereas the material here is very clearly focused on getting people to come visit and then go back home. All right. So I also wanted to talk about this little gem here. So this is a Clausen's map and guide. These were very common. This was kind of the standard for tourism guides in the United States in the early 1900s. So this one is from 1920. This is the first year that it had the green cover, but before they started calling it the Green Guide, which they did the next year. So this one here, and again, you can see this is also the first year that we've got this Native American woman here holding a copy of Clausen's map. And this became the icon for these guides. But as you can see, again, It's really all the information you would need. I love looking at these old maps and looking at what the cities and downtowns looked like for now, what are much larger cities. And this one is kind of a combination of, so here we've got downtown Santa Fe. So this is a combination both railway and auto guide. So there are maps for railways, timetables, things like that, but also automobile roads. So you've got a lot of information about public lands, the different places you can go see. This was really, we Google it today and look for information, and this is how people then would have found information on where to go. Usually these would have a big pull-out map. This one seems to be missing it, unfortunately. But here are the railroad timetables. So just like, when I was growing up, we still had those atlases that had these kind of tables for distances between cities, so that when you were driving around, you would know about how far you could get in a day, that kind of thing. And this is definitely the same thing here. So these Clausens, they were very, very popular, as I said, and really were the standard until about 1931 when they stopped producing them. So another hybrid map. I love this one, even though it has seen better days. So on this side of the map, you'll see that it says Arizona Railroads, and it lists all the different lines and the companies. And so this was kind of how to get around Arizona on the railroad. And if you kind of have to get really close in to see, this one actually has some pencil marks that someone has drawn in later, the roads. But you can see the different lines. These little red numbers tell you what line it is. So that's the key there at the bottom. But what I love about this map is that there's a railroad on the one side, and then the other side is an automobile road map. So this is really that hybrid time period I was talking about, where, a lot of people might have a car that they can come, on their own road trips. But at this time, it's still really, the railroads were still very important. And so that reminds me, so we think about Route 66 as being, the road that really opened up the West for automobile traffic. And so we think about that as being, that kind of was created or became known as Route 66 in 1926. So these are all before Route 66 became such a main road and a way for people to travel around when you don't have all the amenities on one road. And so that's the importance of these maps, is to make sure that you have the information you need before you hop in your car or get on a railroad and head off to your adventures. So during this time, we also kind of have, it's very interesting to me that we have a lot of guides for national parks as well, as early as this. I wanted to show you one example from 1931 for Zion and Bryce Canyon National Parks. So these were put out by the National Park Service. We have quite a few of these in our library collection for different national parks and monuments. But you'll see, photography, but it's not in color yet. And so imagine seeing only these photographs and then going to Zion and seeing them in full life color. Had to been absolutely amazing. But here we have a lot of information, little maps kind of showing the region and how to get to where you're going, all of the different, in this area, different national monuments and parks that are all close together, showing you how many places you can visit at a time. And I wanted to show also this map I love, because it also has that kind of 3/4 profile perspective, just to make it a little more interesting and a little bit more appealing to the eye. This one is interesting because here again we can see Williams is right here. Williams was really the hot spot for the railroad because that's where the railroad to the Grand Canyon came out through. I kind of love this right here where it shows you that you can walk or take a mule along the trail and then pick up this road on the other rim. So I don't know how many people would do that and then not have their car to get to where they're going, but it's possible that they would. And this is also great because, you know, this is supposed to be for Bryce Canyon and Zion, which are up here, but it's kind of putting it into the regional perspective of what else is around, you know, different national monuments, Grand Canyon, all that kind of thing. And so, and I love that this is, you know, this is a line drawing. Somebody would have meticulously done this by hand in pen and ink, and then they would have reproduced it in mass printings like this. But still being able to add some images showing different things that people would see out and about. So that's kind of where we are right there. The next map I wanted to show you is from 1930. And I wanted to point out also that, you know, a lot of these early maps would have been produced by railroad companies, oil companies. They really wanted people to use these tools to then go on these trips, so they would have to buy products from these companies. And so this is kind of that era of not just tourism for tourism's sake or as an industry as we think about it today, but really these were the companies who were promoting all of this travel and getting people out to see what was happening out here in the Southwest. I actually kind of love this map because the front cover, when it was folded up, this would have been the front cover. So this one is from Texaco. This is Arizona and New Mexico. Shows a man here in the car looking at this Texaco map, which is very meta, very nice, being attended to by a gas station attendant, because of course in those days there were oftentimes attendants to pump your gas for you. You didn't even have to get out of the car. And it shows you, you know, this is Texaco saying, you know, come on out, take these roads, we'll be there to gas up your car wherever you are. And I just love the color scheme and the whole thing. So I just wanted to show you, I'm going to flip this around this way a little bit. So on this side we also have a map of the entire country, kind of showing the highway system. This is of course before the interstate system in the 50s, and so these are federal highways, and so people can see where they are, wherever they are on the East Coast, in the Midwest, how to get to where they're going out this way. All right, so I'm gonna flip this over now and kind of show you what we are looking at here. So again, very simple color scheme. This one is similar to the other map in that it has the highways, but also railroad lines. So we're still kind of in that transitionary period, just a little bit. And you can see, you know, all of these different routes to get to where you're going. The red-green is very interesting to me because it's striking to us who see full color. But for people who are colorblind, this must have been a very difficult map to use. So just little things like that we think about today when we look at these historic documents. So up here we've got Navajo National Monument right there, showing you 89 again to get up to the Grand Canyon. And it's very common to have either regional maps or multi-state maps. Not necessarily everybody produced a map for a specific state. And this one, as you can see, it shows you a little bit of Utah up here, just to kind of show you what's around the states that this map is supposed to be focusing on, which makes sense for us as well, because that's good. It kind of fits in our geographic scope as well here in the Colorado Plateau and Four Corners region. And so I'm just kind of let Darwin move around and zoom in on some interesting stuff. We've got Mesa Verde up here. Santa Fe was already a huge city attraction, which it continues to be today as well. So that's that map. I just kind of wanted to show some preliminary, maybe not so exciting maps, but still very interesting, and they tell us a lot about what was going on, how people thought about not just the West and the Southwest, but just travel in general at this time period. So I'm going to pull one here. This one is from, I believe, 1940. So we start seeing a lot of color kind of in this time period to really draw the eye We've got some really, I love these illustration styles. I want to say this to a lot of people I see on the road, you know, what's your hurry? Stop, you know, go slow so you can see what's going on here. But the typefaces, the color schemes, it's still trying to pull people out to say, there's some really interesting stuff to come see. It's worth your time to hop in the car and take a road trip out to Arizona. And so we have here, you know, prehistoric Arizona. I love this little guy on his dinosaur. It's pretty great, very Flintstones. And so again, this is very dated information at this point. Some of these depictions are not good, but it does tell us, you know, all these different stories of Arizona in this case. These different time periods, different things to see. So I'm going to flip this over because this is one of my favorite maps that I'm going to show you today. So this is a full pictorial map, and these were very common in the 30s, 40s, and even afterwards. A lot of the times collectors today collect specifically pictorial maps. And you can see, again, someone has made the trouble to make all of these little illustrations. I actually love this Rainbow Bridge depiction here. It's great. And this is kind of, again, thinking about this area from the white and most likely East Coast perspective of, you know, look at all this cool stuff. I don't really know any details before I go, but maybe I'll learn something when I get there. So you see all these depictions up here on what's now the Navajo Nation of people doing things. And this is also something I want to talk about, is that not just the land was seen as an attraction, but the people as well. For better or worse, a lot of the Native American communities in this area were seen as a tourism destination. You know, trading posts, different stalls, just like today actually along roads you'll see artist stalls and things like that. But that was very much part of the draw to this area, not just, you know, the Grand Canyon or Meteor Crater or a lake. So that's something that's interesting to think about, and thinking about the motivation for that and how that impacted those communities, and how people took that information that they gathered while they were in those areas back home. So you have people collecting baskets, you have people collecting textiles, and taking them back to their homes, wherever those may be. And so again, there's just some great depictions here. We've got a park ranger at the Grand Canyon here. Where is Flagstaff is right down here. You see Lowell Observatory and the San Francisco Peaks of what they've decided to outline here. Sunset Crater, all kinds of great stuff. So I just really love these depictions, even though some of them, you know, I look at and it's kind of yikes, why would you do that? But very indicative of the time. And just really trying to get people out here. So this is, of course, after Hoover, what was then referred to as Boulder Dam, and the creation of Lake Mead. So we see a fisherman here taking advantage of the recreation area that was created by that damming. And this is very, you know, very positive depictions of the area, not really thinking about, you know, environmental concerns that would come about later in the 50s and 60s. Just really trying to get people to come out, see the amazing area, and spend money, of course. That was, of course, the ultimate goal. And I know that, you know, we focus on the northern part of Arizona, but it's very interesting to kind of look, you know, we've got, you know, what are still national monuments here at Tuzagut and Montezuma Castle and Montezuma Well. Just all over, they really wanted people to come out and take a look. So I could sit here and look at this all day, but of course we don't have time for that. But like just really cute and funny, you know, Oregon pipe cactus national monument. You've got some singing cacti here. Anyway, clearly I love this map, and they were very, very popular and common at this time period. So So I'm going to pull out another one that's very similar here. So this one is more thematic than the last one. So in the 40s and 50s, we really see a resurgence of, not a resurgence, but a surgence of people being interested in specifically historic sites in the Southwest. So this one is specifically historical trails through New Mexico. And of course, New Mexico has a very long history of European contact, a lot of history of trails heading west, and especially centers around Santa Fe. So we've got a lot of conquistador imagery going on here, interactions with Native American communities. And so even though we have this focus on, something historic, it's still, in the sense of what can I go see? How can I go experience history? How can I go and actually be in those places that I've learned about or read about, and really experience them as a place? And so that's really kind of the purpose of this map, as well as being quite beautiful. So full color. I also wanted to kind of show, again, we've got focus on the Native communities here. We've got Acoma Pueblo outlined right here, Chaco Canyon, which of course now is Chaco Culture Historic Park. And just a lot of, people who are, fans of New Mexico or really love it as a state will see a lot of good New Mexico imagery. We've got the Zia symbol here. Even the key is beautiful graphically. It shows you kind of what the different styles are, the different roads and trails. And so you could get in your car, you could drive out here, and you could explore these historic trails. So it'll show you the highway, but also tell you, this used to be this trail. And so it's the same route that's been used at this point for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so that's also really interesting, is that continuity of people in a place over time, and being aware of that when you go to those places and experience them. So you'll notice down here in this little text box, it says prepared for free distribution by the New Mexico State Tourism Bureau. So we're starting to see the states and these different locations like national monuments really step up their production of their own marketing materials. Before that, like I was saying, it would be these railroads or automobile companies putting out these. So here we start to see those places kind of taking a bigger interest because they're seeing a lot of interest from people. They're depending on this revenue for the economy. So you start to see kind of everybody putting out these materials to get people to come visit. So let's move on.
Someone had a question. What's the date on this map?
This one is from 1940. Excellent question. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So those are both kind of around 1940, 1941. A lot of really great pictorial maps. And this one here, I just wanted to show just a little, another depiction of the Grand Canyon, because you can kind of see how the focus has changed from that early railroad one that I showed you to focusing on here's how you actually drive to the canyon. Because as you know, over here, you can see this is where the railroad would come in. So historically, this is where you would come in from. But they're showing you now, here's how you drive in, and here's where you park. Here's where you can camp. Here's how you enjoy the park from your car. And so you kind of see that that shift is pretty complete at this point. The railroad doesn't even point all the way down to the end of the map. It just kind of stops. And kind of showing you, you park here and then you can enjoy the rim or hop on a trail into the park from where you are in the parking lot. And so this one's just really interesting as well. This is 1958, in case I didn't mention that. And of course that profile view too. It makes it so much more interesting than a flat map. And just a quick little look at the back side is all about how to visit the park, the different amenities, and also, the things that are very important, of course, in this area. We know fire is an issue, so they have to make sure that everyone coming from other parts of the country where that's not so much an issue, where they actually have a lot of humidity and they don't have to worry about fire, just to be aware of what's going on in this area. So with that, let's take a look at this next map here. I'm going to show you kind of the, outside of it. So here we've got a map of Hoover Dam, Las Vegas, Lake Mead area. It's put together by the Union Pacific Railroad. So even though we have a lot more people coming out in their cars, that's not to say that people aren't still using the railroads for passengers at that point. So we've got you'll notice a lot of full color photography at this point. This, I believe, is from 1963. And so between the 50s, 40s, we've got hand-colored, full-color prints and black and white photography. Here we've got full-color photography, really showing a snapshot of these places and what people can experience when they get there. And so I'm going to flip this over real quick so we can see the full view, which is pretty amazing. So it's kind of a topographical map. And kind of a road map, and kind of just a really hybrid look at the area. And so, by the 60s, Las Vegas is well established, Hoover Dam is well established as a tourist attraction. So the point of this map is really to kind of show what else is in this area. And so we've got some other cities, looks like Paradise Valley right here, the Hoover Dam in color, stopping for a tour on the Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, different places that you can, they even have a little boat route here, which is pretty great. You can track all the way up into the canyon here. And also interesting, there's a proposed site for another dam up here. And so a lot of the times, we're still in that time period where there's a lot of work being done to dam up rivers and manage water and create recreational spaces as kind of a compromise for doing that. And so a lot of these maps do have proposed sites for things like that as well. But again, I just love the angle on this, and up here you can see, we've got, don't forget Zion, don't forget Bryce Canyon, and all the way up here, Salt Lake City. If you make it all the way, you can get to there. So that's kind of where we're at. This is, again, 1960s. So this is still kind of hybrid because it is the railroad, but very different style and a different way of thinking about land and how that was managed and how to access it. This is another map that I am a big fan of. So this actually shows Arizona and Southern California. This one was produced by the Ford Motor Company in 1962. It says over here, compliments of your Ford dealer. So this is something people would have picked up while they were having their car serviced. Weekend vacation guide to the Western Southland. And so this is more from the perspective of, people living in LA or in Southern California, wanting to get out of the city and really experience, what's going on around the region and seeing, we can leave the state but not be too far away from home. So again, we've got some great pictorial imagery here, more Hoover Dam, lovely Grand Canyon here. I love this. There is an edge, so don't lean off with your camera. It's pretty great. And again, we have this depiction of Native American life up here. A lot of imagery of people sitting at looms, weaving, cliff dwellings up here in Mesa Verde. Just great imagery. Painted desert. And we think about, how unique would that experience have been? Somebody who lives in New York or lives, even in the Smoky Mountains or something like that, coming out and seeing something like the Painted Desert or the Grand Canyon and thinking, wow, this is still in my country, but very, very different than the place I live. So it's really interesting, kind of showing people the options. I also love how large Disneyland is here. You see the family trucking themselves to Disneyland for the week, perhaps, and enjoying the ocean, which they might not have at home. It's just a really great, clearly I love pictorial maps because they're just so visually interesting, and they tell you so much about the people and what they were experiencing at the time. So let's move on to another historic map, historic site map here. Again, this is from 1963 as well, so this is another one of those, come visit our state, but let's put a historic twist on it. So very much Wild West. We've got lost mines and ghost towns. You know, the obsession with ghost towns hit its peak in the 50s into the 60s. They were definitely very popular destinations, and so they put out this entire map with just ghost towns, mines, and military forts as well, of course. Military history, a huge deal at this time. What I love about this one, again, is it's all hand-drawn, but it also incorporates a lot of, I don't even know what's going on this map, honestly. There's a lot of, again, very bad depictions of historic, confrontations between white people and Native American people. We see here some conquistadors who have left all of their, their weapons and their armor here. Very, rugged Wild West looking back at the history of the state, which, of course, we all know, the history of this area goes back much farther than statehood. But if you think about it, it's only been 50 years since Arizona became a state, and already we're focusing on, historic places to go, frontier military forts, and really harkening back to that Wild West, which was very common all over the country, really. And so, yeah, I just wanted to pull this one out because it's just a beautiful map. Tells you a lot about what people were interested in at the time. And I really love really fun typefaces, so that's kind of why I picked this one. So yeah, and this would continue really even into the present day. You have people who are super interested in old historic sites. We bank on it, but those sites themselves are producing their own materials and kind of getting the word out about what they can offer visitors. So we're going to kind of move into more full color guide kind of materials from the 60s. So this is a Mesa Verde pictorial guide. You'll see full color photographs again. Kind of once you make the move into color, you see that people don't really want to go back to black and white photos, even though it would have been cheaper. Again, we've got this great pictorial map at a 3/4 profile. This guide is actually interesting in and of itself because it was created by Ansel Hall, who was the leader of the Rainbow Bridge Monument Valley expedition back in the 30s. And so he worked for the National Park Service. He kind of conducted those expeditions and was the overall supervisor for those. And so you can see even into the 60s, he is still very dedicated to this area, to this place, and getting the word out to have people come visit it. So I just want to kind of show you a couple of things you can see here. A lot of ladders. This is back when they let people just climb kind of all over the ruins, which we of course don't do today. We know that it degrades the space and makes it harder for other people to enjoy. But I just love looking at these, full color photographs showing roads, of course, of this is an accessible area. This is somewhere you can hop in your car and go, and it will be worth your while. Also information about how to get to where you're going, how to enter the park, where to stay, what you can look at, what you can do. Another little hand-drawn map here, which is awesome. Different campgrounds and cabins. So you have people, taking off weeks, maybe a month at a time, and just hopping in their car, heading west, and staying kind of wherever they felt like. This is before you had to plan out your entire itinerary and reserve campgrounds and things like that. It was very much more, you could just show up and there would be something for you And, you know, I feel like it must have been less stressful just knowing that there was going to be something for you when you get there, instead of having everything planned out beforehand. So you can kind of see different drives through Mesa Verde to get to all the different cliff dwellings and attractions here. So I just kind of want to show kind of what that looks like. I mean, comparing to that, you know, the Zion and Bryce Canyon when we looked at from 1931, you know, this is very, very different. A lot more color, a lot more, you know, dynamic going on. I forgot to mention also, we're also kind of seeing the results of the boom in creating an industry of tourism post-World War II. So after World War II, you know, everyone is, you know, there's a boom in everything. You got the baby boom, we've got economic growth and stability, and so that's why we're seeing also this increase in production of tourism materials, is because it became a full industry. People had money and cars and time to take off of work to go visit these places, and so we're kind of seeing that in these materials here. It's kind of amazing to me how many photographs are in this one. They must have gone out and gathered these from multiple different photographers. Again, we've got someone climbing up to Balcony House here, and just showing people in the parks as well, because we were seeing, you know, just scenic photographs in some of the earlier ones. Here we're seeing people enjoying these public spaces. And especially the national park system really grew during this time period. We have an appreciation of public land, people thinking, if this is public land, I am entitled to go see it and enjoy it and interact with it. And so that's part of what we're seeing here as well. Just an increase of people utilizing the public lands at this time. So one more example from the Grand Canyon. It's kind of hard to avoid the Grand Canyon. But this little pamphlet is from 1963, I believe. And it's interesting to me because this is still the Fred Harvey Company at this point. So Fred Harvey, of course, the Fred Harvey Company, huge early tourism, providing amenities and, you know, restaurants and lodges and all kinds of things along popular routes along Route 66. And so we have, oh, I misspoke, this is from 1969. And so even in 1969, they were still around and still producing these materials and taking care of people who came to visit. So again, another depiction of the Grand Canyon up here. We've got Motor Lodge, which is not something we saw on any of the other maps. And so this is that, you know, acknowledgement of you're coming here in your car and you want somewhere to be able to park and stay and not have to worry about things too much. So I'm going to try and open this up all the way and kind of show you, again, we've got a lot of color, a lot of photographs, still have some illustrations as well, and just really, you know, all year round. Come see us anytime. It doesn't have to be, you know, a summer vacation necessarily, which is of course easier for locals, but at the time, not unheard of for anyone else as well. And here we see the incorporation of, again, this tourism industry, people who are conducting tours, bus tours, much like today. So we start seeing that this is like an entire industry. We see a bus arriving here, people getting off. And so we kind of see that shift from people, you know, maybe they come to the Grand Canyon and they stay for a week and they're there. This is maybe a day or two trip and on part of a larger trip, visiting a lot of different places. So we kind of see there's a shift in how people are traveling, how people are thinking about their trips and tourism in general. So coming on. Another thing we see here, like I was saying, is that we start to see those government agencies creating their own materials. So this is created by the Bureau of Land Management. here, and this is specifically for recreation and wildlife. So this is from, I want to say this is, there it is, 1971. So we're kind of getting into the 70s. We've got more environmental consciousness happening, and so focusing on wilderness areas and recreation on public lands responsibly is kind of what we're seeing in here. So it's not just about come see the scenery, come see, historic ruins, prehistoric ruins, things like that. This is come see the wildlife that's here. Come see the ecosystem and encounter it and be part of it. So that's why we've got all these different, this cute little cottontail rabbit here, to really get people in coming out, doing bird watching, just, watching out for animals in these areas, as well as doing other things. And you can kind of see that this is what I was talking about here. This is your land, keep it clean. We see more of a focus on the whole pack it in, pack it out mentality, preserving the areas for future generations, keeping it clean, not just throwing trash around and things like that. And so this map is really interesting because it shows the interlocking land ownership in this area. So the brown is the BLM administered land, the blue is state land, national forest is green, national parks is purple, and so you can kind of see how it's not all one agency. So all these areas, this is helpful because then people who are traveling here understand, okay, so for this area I need to make sure I'm doing what the National Forest needs me to do. In this area, what are the BLM rules? It's kind of knowing what the rules are for land use in different areas on your travels. And so, again, we see this shift kind of in thinking about that. I also just love, this cover, lonely car on a dirt road, still thinking about it as a very remote, not kind of thinking of it as an untouched area, even though we know that that's not true, but kind of selling this idea of this is public land, it's clean, it's pure, it's nature, it's a resource for you to go enjoy. I'm going to pull out another one here. I know I said earlier that once you go into full color, you don't necessarily go back to black and white. Here's an exception that proves that rule. So this is from the Chaco Canyon National Forest. This one, I believe, is from 1972. And so we see the San Francisco Peaks being featured here. Chaco Canyon National Forest, of course, is a huge area, surrounds Flagstaff and all of the surrounding area. I pulled this one because I really love how many photographs they fit onto this side of the map. Even though they're in black and white, mostly to save money, printing in color was definitely more expensive, and so this would have been a more economic way of printing. But they really have packed it in here, recreation, forest, how to use the forest for timber, water resources, really giving people a good idea of what they could experience and what they can do in these areas. So that's kind of the feeling here. We see, again, wildlife being pointed out and featured, and natural resources. And then here we see Slide Rock and Oak Creek Canyon, very popular spot still today. Again, showing people enjoying the spaces, really making a human connection between the image and the audience here. I'm going to flip this over for a little look here. So on one side, kind of telling you all the different things you need to know and the different things you can do, and then this side showing you the boundaries of the forest, the different things inside the forest. Flagstaff, of course, right here. And then San Francisco Peaks natural area up here. And really showing, I think a lot of people think of the Coconino National Forest, if they're not familiar, as being, a Flagstaff-centric forest. But as you can see, it's a massive area. It goes all the way where it borders the Tonto National Forest. And so you're kind of, and Sitgreaves over here, so you're kind of seeing how the forest system interlocks as well, letting people know just how easy it is to enjoy all of these different national forests and public lands. And yeah, it's just a great map showing all the different things from this perspective. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. So we've got the bit about public lands and utilizing them and really getting the most out of your tax dollars. We're going to kind of switch to depictions of those people as attractions, as I mentioned earlier. So this is a map here from 1964. So this is put together by the Travel Information section of the Arizona Department of Economic Planning and Development. And so you see that at this point, Arizona has created an entire agency to draw people to the state and really get people to come spend their money on vacation. And one of the ways that they did that was by featuring the people that you could meet whose culture is very different from the mainstream culture. And so we see here all the different tribes that are featured on this map, kind of a little bit of information, introduction information. It's kind of funny that, this is billed as an exciting, thrilling area because you get to interact with all these different cultures without leaving the country. But I love this, again, on their pictorial map. And this one, I was chatting with Darvin about this earlier, and this one seems to be, more accurate depictions of Native American communities. You don't see the stereotypical, headdresses that aren't even part of these tribes' traditions. You see people holding handiwork that actually looks like it's from their culture. And so you see a little bit of maturing here, even though they're being used as an attraction, at least being more accurate in that. It's a step in the right direction at this point in the 60s. So this one focuses on, the reservation areas. It has national monuments and parks as well. I kind of love that the outside here we have different types of ceramic designs. We see the influence of archaeology coming into play in here, as well as the ethnology. Just really utilizing all of the information that people have gathered to get people out to Arizona and take a look at what we had to offer at that time. So this next map is, again, one of my favorites. I love this one because, again, all hand-drawn. The angles are amazing. Notice down here we've got kind of a on-the-ground view, kind of seeing what there is to see, some illustrations, and kind of showing, here we've got an inset showing the area in context. So again, Colorado Plateau, and showing where Monument Valley fits within that there. It's also interesting because it's kind of a topographical relief map. You've got different elevations kind of showing, like, it's not flat like some other parts of the country. These are the elevations of these different places to go. And then up here again, we've got another, side profile view of different points and landmarks. So you can imagine somebody taking this in their car, stopping on a highway in Monument Valley and holding it up and looking to see where they are, see if they can identify different landmarks while we're sitting there, and just really soaking in this area and experiencing it, and getting some context at the same time. So this is from 1962, and this is an interesting map because, even though it was created for the state's centennial, it was actually created and published by somebody in New Hampshire. So this is just purely a souvenir map that was created outside of the area, using all the information available at the time. And on the back we have a lot of information, of course, about, you know, Navajo Tribal Park at that time, different things you can see, a warning about climate. Again, this is a desert, so it's going to be a lot different than what you're used to. Make sure you bring enough water, you know, all those kind of things. Another map over here, this is more of the region as well. And so I also just like the typeface of this map, very indicative of 60s style, and really just a beautiful map. So we're going to switch from, you know, maps about Native Americans being created outside of those communities to something that's created from within those communities. So here we have a map kind of called, you know, Discover Navajo Land in 1968, Centennial Year. This is actually published by the Navajo tribe. Somebody picked this up from the Navajo Tribal Museum on their visit. Again, we've got some illustrations. This looks like it's probably a painting that they got from somebody to use on the cover. A lot of full color photography showing all the different activities and different places to go. And then this map here has all of these different places. So this is coming from the Navajo Nation themselves, telling people, you know, this is how you get to all these amazing areas. And then down here, we're going to have more information about each place. So it's purely tourism coming from the tribe themselves, getting people to come out and visit them responsibly, but also relying on that revenue. Like I was mentioning before, tourism, you know, exploded. It was a huge revenue generator for not just states or federal agencies, but for the sites and those people themselves. And so this is a good example of that, using the centennial year as a focal point for really getting people to come out and see these different places. And so we've got, you know, Canyon de Chelly right here, but then also just, you know, all those tribal roads, you know, people coming out, they just get onto the reservation and they're like, I don't know where anything is or where to go. This is a good way to at least point people in the right direction. So I've got one more map here. So this is kind of a sister map to the one that I just showed. This is another Navajo land map, but this one is from 1960, so a little bit earlier. So we get kind of the mix between, you know, full color illustrations, which are clearly hand painted, and then also some full color photography here, down here as well. And this one is also created by the Navajo Tribal Council. So again, this is them wanting to get people to come and visit their reservation and support them with revenue. This, of course, is the map that we showed as a preview. I love this map. There's so much going on. There's so many cool illustrations, and just the artistry is pretty amazing. So we have a lot of these depictions around the edge here. Shepherdesses with their sheep. Hogan. Again, the San Francisco Peaks. Little nod to NAU down here at Flagstaff. So we've got a lot going on around the map, and then within the region that's focusing on, we have these cute little illustrations of people doing various activities. So, and the other interesting thing about these Navajo maps is that they do show the Hopi Reservation inside, and still show all these different places you can go, things you could see, and so that's really cool. For example, this one here, you know, oldest continuously inhabited village in the United States. Very cool to see. And yeah, I just, there's so much to see here. It's kind of hard for Darwin to pick just one thing and kind of go with it. But you could spend a lot of time looking at these maps. Again, Canyon de Chelly in situ there, the different lakes and things. And then, of course, we've got, again, another weaver at her loom, very popular imagery still here. So to kind of, just to sum up, we have a lot of different, you know, we've seen a lot of different angles coming at how people think about tourism as an activity, as an industry, who's creating material. At this point, pretty much everybody is doing that. The sites are creating their own materials, tribes are creating their own materials, and it's really, you know, we kind of stopped about 1970, even though we know maps were continuously created after that as well. But especially when we think about, you know, how things were presented over time, and now we've shifted to a lot of online content, official websites, travel guides, things like that. It's still a huge industry, but maybe just works a little bit different than it did before. So Darvin's kind of looking through to see if there's any questions in the comments.
One question is why aren't you wearing gloves?
Why am I not wearing gloves? Excellent question. The gloves are only really for photographic materials to keep the oils off from your hands off of the photograph. For paper, it's actually much safer to use clean, dry hands. That way you don't accidentally rip something with a glove on, but that's a good question.
This is not so much a question, but more of a comment. The depiction of horrific Spanish conquest is shown, yet not the not-so-good depictions of indigenous First People. Do you want to speak on that a little bit?
I do know which one we are talking about. I'll pull that one back out. I believe you're talking about this map here. Because I mentioned here we've got, you know, the native white interaction going on here, but there were a lot of images of conquistadors on, I believe you're talking about this map down here. A lot of conquistador imagery going on here in the New Mexico map. That's a good point. Like, that's also something that is depicted in a very positive, like, look at our history kind of way, even though we know it was brutal and horrible and just really violent. That's kind of the point of me showing this map, is to show that by the time we're thinking about this in 1940, it's being romanticized and it's being shown as like a fun historic thing to go see, even though we aren't getting the whole story at this point. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much. See you next time.